Now, last week, FCC Chairman and former Verizon lobbyist Ajit Pai released his plan and a date to vote on the plan to basically dismantle net neutrality. Now, this comes, of course, after a very controversial comment period where millions of people flooded the FCC website in order to weigh in on their opinion on net neutrality and whether we should keep those rules. Now, these rules, of course, were created in 2015 to pretty much enforce what the internet had always been, free and open, okay? And to make sure that all traffic on the internet is kept the same. Before, we had sort of an implicit promise like, hey, you know, we're going to treat everything on the internet the exact same way, right? That we're not going to throttle, we're not going to slow people down, we're not going to block websites just because they might belong to a competitor, and we're talking about the ISPs here. We're not going to do any of that. Okay, we're going to treat it as a free and open playing field. And what the 2015 decision under the Obama administration had done is basically enshrine those rules in the law. Okay, so the telecoms not exactly happy. Okay, and of course, Ajit Pai, who represented Verizon, one of the biggest lobbyists, or one of the biggest groups that is against net neutrality rules, well, when he got put into place, he got put there by the industry to destroy net neutrality. That's basically what happened. So he did this comment period, which is customary in the FCC, and you got a lot of comments that were actually in favor of the rules. Since, you know, most people actually don't want to pay more to access their favorite websites or get throttled or get slowed down, right? Now, but there was also a lot of comments that were not in favor of those rules. Now, of course, a lot of the people who made those comments, they had to be on the internet, right? Meaning that they had to pay the ISP for access to the internet. Now, it doesn't make sense to me personally that people would actually want to pay more for that access. But that's what repealing net neutrality would actually do. It would allow the telecoms to be able to actually charge more for that access. Now, to be fair, some of those comments might have been from people who just didn't understand how net neutrality actually works. You know, these people are like, "Hey, free markets, man. We believe in limited government and limited government regulation, and that regulation actually hurts." Okay, well, in this case, the free market solution to them is to let these companies who are already enormously powerful and have too much control over access to the internet to have more access to the internet. Or, I'm sorry, to have more control over the access to the internet. Now, that control would mean, of course, blocking certain sites that may belong to competitors, throttling them. There's a lot of small businesses that are very, very concerned that have gone online that are like, hey, if we do these rules, what's to prevent my competitor from paying fast lane, paying for a fast lane when we can't afford that? Well, too bad, right? That's going to hurt competition. Not to mention paywalls. There's nothing that I hate more in life than a paywall. I'm going to be completely honest with you. That's why all my content is free. Okay. Now, all net neutrality means is that, like I said, all that content on the internet is not put behind at least another paywall, because the ISP is already a paywall, right? And that's the only one. And without net neutrality, there's going to be a lot more, okay, especially when it comes to speed and price, right? Now, without those rules, for example, the internet's going to start looking like a lot like cable TV, and that ISPs might end up selling internet packages like they do in Portugal with fast access to certain websites for an extra $5-10 a month on top of what you pay just for having a connection to the internet. So there's just people who don't understand that because they believe whatever pro-corporate propaganda they're fed, or the fact that a lot of liberals, a lot of progressives are in favor of net neutrality. So they are like, hey, I don't like net neutrality. You know why? Because it triggers the libs. Yes, there are people that don't. But those people, I think, are a minority of these negative comments. I think there's the rest that are paid bots. And I'm not the only one who thinks that, actually. New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman also wrote in a letter to the FCC that he believes that this comment period, this process, has actually been corrupted by fraud. Now, and he said that for the past 6 months, hundreds of thousands of submissions may have impersonated New York residents. Now, that's interesting. So he's saying that, look, a lot of these commenters that are pro-repeal net neutrality, well, these are people that aren't actually people that have impersonated residents of our state, and that actually may be a crime. And he also noted that some consumers have complained in letters to the FCC that their own names or addresses have been hijacked and used to submit false comments to the FCC that they did not support. There were reports of dead people also leaving comments. And of course, a majority of these fake comments were in favor of Pai's plan to repeal net neutrality rules. Of course. Now the FCC comes out and says, oh, no, actually, that's wrong. We actually found that most people in support of internet regulations, those guys were the fake ones. And that, most people actually do want to pay more for internet access. That's an interesting take. FCC spokesman Brian Hart said that many of the 7.5 million comments filed in favor of the regulations that appear to come from 45,000 distinct email addresses were all generated by a fake email generator website. And get this, they're claiming, but Brian Hart, FCC spokesperson, right, for Ajit Pai, is saying that this fake email generator website was based in none other than Russia. They're blaming the Russians. This is an ironic twist. Okay. And Hart says, the most suspicious activity has been by those supporting internet regulation. Bitch, you're going to tell me that's the Russians? You're going to tell me that the Russians are anti-net neutrality? No, I'm not buying it. Look, this just kind of fits in with a little bit of the McCarthyism we've been seeing all around. I'm just saying, look, the Russians are not behind everything. And next they're going to tell us to correct a record trolls that harassed female Bernie Sanders supporters, for example, during the primary with, rape threats and just misogynistic statements. Those were also Russian bots. That's what they're going to tell you. Okay. No, what they're doing is that they're just going along with the major narrative of, hey, Russia did it. Because that's apparently what a lot of people are doing. Now, there are significant concerns about Russian interference in our election. And I've talked about that. And I believe that. And there are Russian troll farms, right? But come on. On an issue like net neutrality, no, I don't believe that a majority of Russian or a majority of these pro-government comments are from Russian bots. No, especially when it's their word against the entire internet. Now, look, some of you might be like, oh, come on. If the Russians didn't do it, well, who did? Who made all these fake comments? I would say the companies. I believe the companies did it. Now, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they do that? That's the question. Look, these companies have already spent millions and millions of dollars in lobbying to try to buy our politicians into not supporting things like net neutrality rule. Okay? They also face a windfall of profits if these rules are repealed. You don't think they would spend some of that money on bots in order to go and try to influence this incredibly important rule? Come on. And look, I've got some examples for you. See, some of these public comments that are in favor of repealing net neutrality rules, they sound a lot like industry talking points. They seem very bottish to me. And I've got, like I said, a couple of examples here. One submission read, citizens as opposed to Washington bureaucrats should be empowered to buy whatever products they prefer. Here's another one. Individual citizens as opposed to Washington bureaucrats should be able to select whatever services they desire. I have the desire to read that in a robot voice because that's exactly what that sounds like. No human actually talks like that. Okay? Just like no human actually likes paywalls. No human actually likes to pay more for internet access or to be able to access their favorite sites without paying an extra premium. No one likes fees and premiums. Just saying. This is not a real person, okay? And there's plenty more. Approximately 1.3 million of these comments sound a lot like that. And this is according to a study, and I'll get into that. Now, Schneiderman, of course, noticed how a lot of these pro-repeal comments are very bot-like. And there's another guy, it's a data scientist named Jeff Kao. Now, he recently published a story because he looked at this. He published a study of some of these pro-repeal comments in a blog post. Now, he said, quote, "It was particularly chilling to see these spam comments all in one place, as they are exactly the type of policy arguments and language you expect to see in industry comments on the proposed repeal." Now, how he found out that these are bots, or the reason that he believes that most of these are fake comments and bots, is that he used an algorithm to create, to sort out duplicate entries, and then had used another algorithm to identify the remaining comments that could be considered, quote, unique. Now, turns out the unique comments aren't all that unique. Further analysis revealed that some of the unique submissions shared the common language and syntax, suggesting that they weren't unique at all. And this is from the Washington Post. Perhaps written by a computer program to appear superficially different. In total, Kao estimates that more than 1.3 million comments supporting Pai's effort to repeal net neutrality may have been faked. Now, the Washington Post also notes that while it is common for advocacy campaigns to recruit people to sign and submit form letters to the FCC, and I've seen that before, and yes, that can make a lot of these comments sound similar, right? Kao said that so those who supported keeping the rules were far more likely to write personal, heartfelt messages. I know when I wrote my personal, heartfelt message to Ajit Pai, it was definitely unique. And yes, I did try to avoid, as hard as it was, calling him an industry shill. Just saying. Now, back to the Post here. They write, despite the polarizing nature of their policy fight, few commenters who supported the repeal were moved to develop their own original messages, an indication to Kao that many in the pro-repeal camp may have been bots or spam. Because again, if you're one of those people that are wholly against government regulation and you hate everything the government does, are you going to type this very super polite, citizens as opposed to Washington bureaucrats should be empowered to buy whatever products they prefer? No, it's going to be an angry rant, like the government's out to get us and deprive of us all our freedom, so that's why we have to get rid of net neutrality. That sounds much more believable for a comment than individual citizens as opposed to Washington bureaucrats. We're going to use that word, Washington bureaucrat. That sounds like a Republican political ad written up by a political strategist. I think it's pretty obvious that, at least from these two examples, they're definitely bots or spam. But anyway, Kao says on this, quote, "It's scary to think that organic, authentic voices in the public debate are being drowned out by a chorus of spam bots. Especially, like I said, when those spam bots going to support an industry that's going to make millions of dollars killing off these rules." And, of course, he uses the exact same language as the people in that industry. No, that's not fishy at all. Sure. And who other than these gigantic, profitable, billion-dollar companies can afford to create an army of spam bots? But that's not all they've got in their corporate arsenal. Now, this is Jessica Rosenworcel. Now, she is a Democratic FCC commissioner. Now, she's actually in favor of the rules. She came out with an op-ed saying, please save net neutrality from the FCC, who is going to destroy it. She also pointed out that some 50,000 consumer complaints have appeared to have just disappeared from the agency's records. I know that's a weird way to phrase it, but these complaints are gone. So these records, these 50,000 complaints, suddenly just disappeared overnight. That's not weird. Now, she also highlighted a Government Accountability Office probe into an alleged denial of service attack that the FCC claimed prevented consumers from filing submissions on the net neutrality plan. So, okay. Here's the thing about that, right? Look, everybody knew that Ajit Pai wanted to get rid of net neutrality. He said so. So he has not been shy about this, about coming out and saying, hey man, I'm against net neutrality. Having a denial of service attack and making sure that people are denied their voices in this comment period, this very crucial comment period, right? Yes, that would certainly help him. So who's the cause of this DDoS? We don't know for certain, but I'm sure we could come up with a few ideas on who that would be. Look, there's nobody on the internet that does these types of attacks that loves the idea of paying more for access to content. Okay? Why would they launch an attack on the FCC that's trying to eliminate net neutrality rules? I'm just saying. Look, here's the thing, right? I'm not buying. These companies, I believe, will go to any length in order to help their own bottom line. Look, I think it's entirely possible and very, very likely that all this is the work of the telecom industry. You've got, companies Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast. Look, they all despise these rules, okay? And they can't wait, despite their hollow promises of never throttling or blocking or slowing down websites, they can't wait to have the power to do so with impunity. Why would they have to come out and say, we're not going to do any of this stuff that repealing these rules would allow, despite the fact that we've spent millions and millions of dollars on lobbying and, what other activity that they've done, possibly hiring troll farms and bots to go and spam the FCC website, and of course having Trump put in their own guy that will eliminate these net neutrality rules. But we're not actually going to do anything. No, we're going to do business as usual. Anybody who believes that, you're not paying attention. That's exactly what they want to do. They want to use those powers that they'll gain from repealing net neutrality rules to crush their competition and extract every single red cent that they can from their customers. That would be us. And look, the internet is the most powerful tool ever created. And part of the reason that it's so powerful is because of the freedom that we've always had on it. These net neutrality rules and regulations that the right loves to malign as government control and regulation. No, all they do is that they ensure that freedom stays the same and that no one company can tell you where you can go, block your access to websites, and put you behind paywalls. Okay? These rules are the only things that ensure that freedom. And if that goes, and it's looking like it more and more likely that it very much will, well, those people that on the right that actually use the internet and enjoy the freedom of the internet, well, they're in for a rude surprise. But look, it's not over yet, okay? We can still fight back. Yeah, the FCC comment period was a bit of a sham and a huge mess, right? Well, but there's still something you can do. Call your senators. Call the FCC. Call Ajit Pai himself, okay? You can't fake that. Demand that they keep these rules in place. We have to let them know how we feel. Even if we lose, let's at least go down fighting. Because the internet, a free and fair internet, is something worth fighting for. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.